Hello, 422. Great to see you again. It's Dr. Allen. Hope everything's going well. One, it's great talking to a lot of you this week. Actually, it was today. You may notice I'm probably in the same shirt. Actually, I am in the same shirt. There's no probablys about it. Um, just to kind of reiterate, to sum up a little bit about what we talked about, those of you in Jefferson County, I did go ahead and email uh, the technology coordinator over there just to see if she could help us out. Hopefully, by the time you're watching this video, all of your issues with the technology, if you're in Washington High School, will be kind of hammered out, solved. So, but I did CC you on that email, and if you're watching this and haven't heard anything by then, you should have something. The other thing, I'll send out that Google Forms about the Bird Center coming over. I think that would actually be really beneficial if we could do that on a Zoom. We'll do it in lieu of a Flipgrid. I'll tell them we just need a half an hour, 45 minutes, but just something to show you the documents and the resources they have over there. I think if you're going to teach West Virginia history, especially, or U.S. history, they've got a ton of things over there, especially documents-based type things. So Bird Center, I'll send that forms out. Other than that, I'm going to kind of just jump into everything because I know it's a pretty busy week that when you're watching this, it's midterms. There's a lot going on. So what I have to say today is actually a little bit of a repeat of some of the things we've said in some of the other lessons, but kind of tied around U.S. history. So I'm going to just try not to get too wordy. I know I have that ability. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and do it. As you can see this week, it's U.S. history focused. We kind of talked a little bit about that on the discussion boards, even with the 1619 project comments, which were fantastic. The details that everyone went in on there. We're going to have our blogs. The blogs this week, I will say this, and the resources, because I'm assuming most of you may be teaching in West Virginia, or at least you have some West Virginia background, or even Maryland. Some of this will apply to. I want to share some resources on the Geography Bee, Social Studies Fair, National History Day, and Golden Horseshoe, but that's on the blog video, so I won't get bogged down on that. We do have a discussion this week, and actually, this was something I meant to say when we were talking on live this week or last Thursday, which would have been today for me when I'm recording this. You have an assessment that you need to do. And what I mean by that is you're going to grade an assessment. There is an assessment on the discussion board. It's on discussion board forums, or the form. It's in an evaluation. It's got a question on here like it always does. And it's going to say, there's a set of 3 tests. There are 3 tests that are posted up under week 7, which is what this video is. What you need to do is you need to grade those 3 tests. There is an answer key right on top of it. I will warn you that answer key, this is an old textbook test. That's actually one that I use. I will admit it's been about 8 or 9 years ago, but I think it still gets the point across to what I kind of want you to see with assessment. But anyway, regarding that, when you look at the key, it's a test that was on Japan and Korea. It was a 7th grade test. The key actually goes over into 2 pages. The answers start at the bottom of the first page, and then the essay loops over to the other. I say this, and I'll show you where it's located on here, but each question is worth 3 points. There's 30 questions. That's 90. Then there's an essay, and the students got to choose between 1 or 2 topics or prompts. That is worth 10 points, so it's a 100-point test. There is no rubric for the essay. If you want to use a rubric, that is fine. If you want to just have your own little personal scale on the side, that's fine, but I did not attach any type of rubric for the essay. The essays are very, very short. But I'm not going to really say much other than that. What I want you to do is post the scores that you had for the 3 tests and put the comments about whether you thought it was difficult, it was easy, things you liked, things you didn't like, what you struggled with. Just, you can bullet this stuff. You don't have to write it like a novel. I would maybe take a peek at some of the other discussion boards that are posted or prompts that are put up there, only because evaluation is a really tricky thing. And I'm probably going to say this in the next one after we do these, because I want to go back and revisit them. But we all kind of are calibrated different. One thing I really did, especially with students, I tried to grade as many tests and such as I could in one setting, because I always felt like I got calibrated a certain way. sometimes I would also go back to the ones that I did at the beginning. I still do this. I do it a lot in ed tech, I noticed. If you're in there, I know Logan and Cam are in there, but a lot of times in ed tech, I feel like sometimes I'm harder on the ones that I grade at first. And then after seeing everyone's, I kind of say, well, maybe I didn't get something across, or maybe I didn't do this right, so I need to go back and reassess. But with all that being said, I'll do the feedback on it after I read the discussion boards. The packet, though, itself is under week 7, and it is right here under discussion 3. And there's the packet, and when you click that, they are there. You could theoretically grade it on the thing. I would print them out. It's 3. It's not too many pages. The test is, let's just count it real quick. That's the answer key. As you can see, it starts there, and there's the essay. But the test is 1 page, 2 page, and the student wants. So there's 9 pages. If you really don't want to pay the money or anything, printing that out, just tell me. I can get you a copy and leave it for you in the ed department. So with all that being said, sorry I got sidetracked. I get excited about stuff like that. Let's go back, boom, and talk about this week. This week we are talking about U.S. history. I'm going to minimize that. And like I said, I'm not going to get too bogged down with this, because if you read your Zeven, he gets into the approaches and the different ways that you can kind of hit everything. Whoops, go back. There you go. He talks about the different ways that you can hit everything. It's very similar to world history. As a matter of fact, the approaches, the chronological and such, they're almost the same. I'll revisit them briefly because I think it is a little different with U.S. history, only because it's a more condensed period of time and maybe not quite as vast as world history, or even if you were doing AP Europe or something like that. But by and large, the concept is the same. The one thing I really wanted to point out with this unit more than anything, this topic, is the concept of heritage history versus people's history. We've actually talked about this, and I think I alluded to it on some of the feedback that I gave related to the 1619 project in one of the videos that I filmed with that week. But there's a gentleman by the name of James Lowen. He's very, very famous. He wrote a book called Lies My Teachers Told Me. And Howard Zinn gets into this too. I know I've provided that link to you. They get into this thing where they feel like a lot of U.S. history is what they call hero history. Zeven actually calls it heritage history. And what that is it's the idea that the curriculum is kind of based around a certain group of people. And, well, I'll just read the list there, but you see it's the hero and the deeds that were done to make the U.S. a mighty nation. Think about it. George Washington, Jefferson, Adams, Hamilton, now it's very chic, Abraham Lincoln. And actually, if you think about it, well, I'll jump ahead. I'm going to jump ahead, so I'm not going to say this right at the moment. But there's always like key people. And listen, I was as guilty of this as the next person. A lot of times when I think of the history, I always associate it with the presidents, and it's kind of like the presidents, and then everything kind of branches off into that. It's very traditional, and it provides for more straightforward outcomes, which history is not always straightforward. This is definitely the traditional approach. This is probably still the approach we use. But I was really encouraged to see, especially related to the discussion on the 1619 project, no matter what your thoughts on it were, it's definitely the idea. I think everyone had the same line of thinking that we need to kind of expand that, and there's other groups that you need to bring in. An example I always think of, actually, it's probably about 15 years ago. I was in a class, and a young lady asked, "Hey, are we going to learn about any female heroes in the United States history?" And I have to admit, I was still a fairly new teacher, and I was very locked in on, the presidents and things like that. And I told her, well, that's a good question. We need to do that. And I actually kind of expanded that year around something related to the suffragettes and kind of, move forward. But it was something I always recognized, that you need to know your audience, and you need to expand some things. Here's another example. And actually, I'm going to do this one week, and I think I have the book in my room, and I'll show it to you in a week or two. This made a big influence on me, actually, as a teacher. I had a young African-American student, and we were doing those farce books, actually. I talked about last week, and we were doing it, and it was in 6th grade, and we were doing some on World War I. And he was asking, he said he didn't want to do any of the people that were, you know, I had on the list. And I thought, well, I said, I won't say his name. I almost said it. I said, what are you interested in? He told me, well, he goes, I'd like to do something with a African American history background. That's my interest. That's what I want to learn about. And I had just so happened to read, you probably may know him from, he wrote a book called, or I think he wrote the book World War Z, and actually there's a Brad Pitt movie, but Max Brooks, it's Mel Brooks' son actually, he wrote a graphic novel called The Harlem Hellfighters. And I contacted the student's mom and I said, hey, I have this graphic novel. It's a little, this is a 12-year-old at that time. Said it's, it says it's for 14 and plus. I mean, he's interested in this topic. Would you mind if I loaned it to him? She was so happy. He loved the topic. He expanded. I think he ended up doing a social studies fair project on the Harlem Hellfighters just from that. It was a real eye opener to me that, again, hero history, I'm not condemning it. I'm not saying patriotism or anything like that is wrong, but you really do need to consider your audience and expand. We're not all like what I am, just someone of white European descent. We all have different interests, and you need to, I'm not saying you can cover it all, but you need to, think about it a little bit. And I guess what I'm saying is I'm making the case a little bit for people's history, which that's what Zeman and Lowen and such always get into. It's the more of the lives of the common folk, the struggle, for expanded rights, attempts to be unbiased. Sometimes you got to watch. That Zen project I go back and forth with because there's some good stuff on there, but there's also a political tilt to that too. And I think I mentioned this on many videos back. Sometimes you're going to have to ask yourself what type of social studies teacher you're going to be. Are you going to be like the devil's advocate where you kind of you're above everything and you take the opposite side no matter what? I kind of felt like I fell into that a little bit. Are you going to be an activist in the classroom? There's nothing wrong with that. I know I said this, but my mentor teacher was actually very much an activist social studies teacher, and she was awesome, but she was very much into environmental rights, and she kind of connected a lot of her lessons to environmental type things. That was her passion. She would go down to DC and do stuff and all. Nothing wrong with that. It's just you got to find your voice. I'm going to sound wishy-washy. I think I did a little bit of a combo of this because sometimes the standards just lead themselves to this a little bit. But I think you can show different sides, and I guess that's what I'm trying to get into. Like with World War I, I was very guilty of just going in and saying, "Hey, Woodrow Wilson, 14 points, Treaty of Versailles." You're getting into that main, if your militarism, alliance system, imperialism, nationalism, that acronym to teach it. I did that all the time. And it took that one student to say, hey, I want to know something about African-American history in World War I. What do you got? And I was thinking, I need to do this. So again, what I'm trying to get, think about this. I think aspects of both are great. Just don't fall into, well, I'm not going to tell you not to fall into one, but, just recognize, sometimes I think a balance is a good thing. I'm not going to get too far into this. This is kind of rehashing our didactic, reflective, and effective goals. But I did put some sample objectives on there. So if you were going to do, I guess I am going to dive into it. If you want to do a didactic example, you might do to identify something like, and related to the establishment of the U.S., Declaration of Independence, which should be capitalized, Articles of Confederation, Constitution, Bill of Rights, identify the establishment. Pretty cut and dry. That's your didactic. It's your lower level, would that be lower level blooms? My hand's not there. Lower level. Reflective, you want them to analyze things. Apply constitutional and Bill of Rights issues, two issues that affect basic freedoms, analyzing and debating judicial interpretations as a step towards deciding which decisions, such as the American Revolution. I'm sorry, I butchered that whole thing. I'm going to read it again. Apply the Constitution and the Bill of Rights to issues that affect basic freedoms, analyzing and debating the judicial interpretations as a step towards deciding which decisions, such as the American Revolution, the adopting of the Constitution, the Monroe Doctrine, or the Civil War. So, one more. It's still kind of worded a little poorly. I probably had that on there. And then, of course, whoops, the last one, effective. Identify and rank. Rank is what makes this one a little different. The order of importance of different positions on the constitutional guarantee against search and seizures, one of the Bill of Rights. So again, there's some examples for you, and forgive the typo there, I didn't catch that. Read it twice and still kind of butchered it a little bit. It's what we were talking about, like Flipgrid. Sometimes you just mess things up, but you just got to keep going. All right. Approaches to instructional organization. I talked about these last week, basically, with world history. But the chronological, topical approach, I think U.S. history just does this. Again, we've talked about how you can maybe come back and maybe use issues or modern day things and work its way back. The chronological approach, though, is still what most people do. If you think about it, I can do it right here, and we could do it in class if we were face to face. 1492, colonial period, kind of building up to the war, the War of Independence. Of course, you probably have French and Indian War in there. The American Revolution. After the American Revolution, the founding of the Constitution, you get Washington, Adams, then you kind of get some Jefferson stuff. Might do a little War of 1812. Then you're going to kind of go into the Jeffersonian type of stuff. Then you're probably going to do the build up to the Civil War. You're going to do the Civil War. Might do a little bit of that Gilded Age stuff, but it seems a lot of times like it goes Civil War, a little bit of Gilded Age, World War I, World War II, Cold War, which is going to get your Vietnam and things. Then you're going to get into 70s, 80s, modern era, still that end of the Cold War, and of course the modern era. It's kind of how it works. The funny thing is, and this is something we talk about a lot, or we have in the past, it always comes up, so I'm going to make sure I bring it up here. If you think about it, a lot of times in U.S. history, especially in the modern one, we don't always get to where we need to. I've had students say they've never really got past the Vietnam War or the 70s in a class. They spend more time on the older issues, like World War II especially, and World War I, than a lot of the modern ones. You know, I have to admit, when I was in school, I graduated high school in 1993, and I know we barely made it past the Vietnam War. Hopefully, now you kind of can, but there's more happening, obviously, and more has been added even since I got done school. I mean, it was 30 years past that. You know, 9/11 and the influence of everything that's going on. For better or worse, maybe the stuff that's happening now. We talked about it with 1619 Project, the election of Donald Trump. How did that happen? It's a good thing, bad thing. You know, people have different opinions. There's a lot you can get into with U.S. history. But the problem is sometimes time, especially when you do that chronological approach. I mentioned this. Sometimes you can do the backwards approach. I have to admit, this was something that before I actually came on board full-time at Shepherd, I was really toying with the idea of really trying to dive into this one year. The school I was at, we were having a small class that was coming up that I think I was going to probably have for 6th grade. And I thought they would be a good chance to try that, maybe use certain events and kind of go backwards a little bit. I mean, obviously you do it naturally in class a little bit, and like all these things, you use them, and you kind of probably don't stick to just one, but I still think this one wins out. But I really thought about maybe doing a deep dive on this approach, but I didn't. The thematic approach, again, we talked about that with world history, you know, a lot of times revolutions and things like that. This might be big ideas. You can get into idea of race relations might be one, since it's topical in the news. You could do elections. You could do maybe one on presidents and just do it that way. Maybe do wars. You know, you could do big ideas, big concepts. Court cases, that'd be a great one. Court cases, you can go back in there. So issues-centered approach, that's probably more, I think, in line with the people's history. So you might have something like, you know, the atomic bomb, Reconstruction and the treatment of the South. These are all, you know, good issues that you can maybe look at. That Choices program I had on the resources last week, they have a lot of lessons related to this. You can also do a world approach, the concept that the U.S. is part of an evolving world, the globalization type thing and our role in it. So you can maybe take it from a foreign affairs type perspective. Again, these are all kind of similar to last week. Again, like I said last week, I think this one wins out most of the time. Maybe that one. I always feel like it's this one, and then you might branch off into these. But it is what it is. And actually, on that worldview, there's a nice example there. How the Monroe Doctrine affected the U.S. and South America, because sometimes we don't look at it from that POV, so to speak. Don't worry about the questions. Those are usually talking points I do when we are meeting live. That is no big deal. Though you did miss the smiley face there. That's the U.S. history. Again, really, I think the big thing you got to ask yourself is how you're going to do it. Are you going to do it hero history, people's history, or a little bit of both? And you probably noticed on the thing I said, don't. If you had to pick one, don't say mixed. But in all honesty, I think most of you, just judging from your 1619 comments, you would probably do a mixed type approach. I like that a lot of you said, I would pull things from it, or I might not use this particular approach or lesson, but I think there's stuff in there that maybe if I could find in another place. I think that's the type of stuff you have to do as a social studies teacher. So with that, let me get out of there. This is posted if you need it. And I think that is the big stuff this week. Nothing major. Like I said, I wasn't going to get too long-winded. I'm really fighting that. Don't forget, though, this week you have blog 6, Flipgrid 6, discussion 3. I will have a resource video. The resource video is not going to be too long. It is just me kind of showing you where these sites are, and I will post those sites up for you under extracurricular activities. So with all of that being said, again, my glasses are falling. Put them back up. With all that being said, it was great seeing everyone this week. It's good. I wish we were live, to be honest. But again, I'm going to stop moaning about that. So talk to you later. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me at any time.